People love cheese and shredded cheese, so... I mean, what are you trying to say? I'm saying it used to be a mango. Oh, I love mangoes. Same here, sir. Frickin' delicious. Plus, this used to be a Japanese mango. Very exotic. That's the name of the mango. Yes, sir, it is. And people love cheese and shredded cheese, so... I mean, what are you trying to say? I'm saying it's...
It's been 9 years, and I'm still not over this movie. If you see my channel, you know that Avatar: The Last Airbender is one of my favorite shows, and I've made countless videos on it. I've watched it too many times to count, and every time I do, it draws me into this amazing world. When it was announced that they were making a live-action movie based on the series, I was ecstatic. Unfortunately, I don't think a movie has ever let me down more than The Last Airbender did. Since I saw this movie in theaters, I have not revisited the film. I have not watched any reviews, although I knew that they were terrible. And now, for the first time in 9 years, I'm revisiting this pile of garbage. And as a film student, it hurt me to watch parts of this movie. In this video, I'm going to discuss how this movie disrespected the original series so much, and why it's such a bad movie. M. Night Shyamalan wrote, produced, and directed this film, and some of his work I'm a fan of, like The Sixth Sense, but most of his other work is complete garbage, and this might be the biggest pile of garbage he's ever made, which is saying something. I cannot even fathom how much he disrespected this incredible and almost flawless show. This film was based on book 1 from the series, and initially they planned to make all 3 books, but after this one failed miserably, that idea was dropped. So what went wrong with this film? I have a whole list of things, but let's first start with the characters. When you're telling a story, characters are the most important part. They are who the audience follows on the journey, and they shape the overall narrative. The original series did this perfectly. The characters are relatable, have defining characteristics, and have goals they want to reach. Aang wants to become the Avatar and stop Ozai. Katara wants to learn waterbending and help Aang on his journey, and Sokka wants to lead his team and make his father proud. The thing is, with this film, we do not get the characters that we know and love from the original series. For starters, their names aren't the same. They mispronounce so many things in this movie, and it bugs the hell out of me. They say Aang, the main character's name, wrong.
My name is Aang.
They say Sokka's name wrong.
My people are dying, Sokka.
They say Iroh's name wrong.
General Iroh, I'm glad you could accept my invitation.
And they mispronounce so many other things like Agni Kai.
Agni Kidul.
And the most mind-boggling to me is that they even say Avatar wrong.
The Avatar.
And I'm sure this was on purpose, and I would be less than shocked if Shyamalan was the man behind these decisions. That right there shows so much disrespect to the source material. Why on earth would you change the pronunciations of so many words that we've come to know from the original series? Let's look at how they messed up each character, starting with the main hero of the story. In the show, Aang is brave and shows no fear despite being so young and so small compared to most of his enemies. The movie version of Aang is the complete opposite of this, however. Let's take a look at a few scenes in the show versus the movie, starting with the scene when Zuko arrives in the Southern Water Tribe. The scene is set up the same way in both. Zuko shows up looking for Aang, who he believes to be the Avatar, and he has a fleet of firebenders to back him up. In the show, Aang makes a daring entrance to put a stop to Zuko and to protect the village. But if we look at the same scene in the film, Aang literally hides in a tent and only comes out when he's forced to by Zuko's men. He's a scared little boy when he's supposed to be brave and daring, wanting no one to get hurt. And it gets worse. In the film, Zuko tells the scared little boy that if he doesn't come with him, he'll burn the village down. Zuko sets the terms, and Aang just does what Zuko says.
I'll go with you.
Again, literally sounding like a scared little boy. In the show, however, Aang comes and protects the people, and while doing so, sees the danger that they're in. Seeing this, the selfless and brave Aang turns to Zuko, and here, instead of doing what Zuko says, he's the one who sets the terms, saying that if he leaves the village alone, he'll go with him willingly. And on top of that, Aang is not worried at all. He even lightheartedly turns to Sokka and Katara, telling them that it will be okay, and says to take care of Appa until he gets back, knowing full well that he'll easily escape. One of the most important parts of this scene is Aang seeing the villagers in danger as Zuko shoots fire at them. It's the thing that makes him realize that fighting will only put the innocent villagers in more danger, and why he sets the terms I stated earlier. In the film, we do have firebenders shoot at the villagers. The thing is it happened after Aang already left with Zuko, diminishing the whole point of putting the villagers in danger. One of the biggest problems with this film is that they don't know how to blend dialogue with action. This scene is either all talking and no action, or all action and no talking. Had they combined the firebender going after the villagers with Zuko and Aang's conversation, it could have worked really well because Aang would have had a reason to want to go with Zuko seeing the villagers in danger. It also would have been less dialogue, which the film has way too much of, making it very bulky. Zuko literally says that he'll burn the village down.
If you don't come, I'll burn down this village.
If they had just put the villagers in danger, the audience would have understood, and it would have been way more powerful to see Aang's concern for the villagers rather than just being threatened by Zuko. And as I said, this inability to have action and dialogue together is a constant problem in this film, which I'll explain as I go through more points. Going back to how they portray Aang's bravery, or in the film, their lack of it. The scene where Zhao has Aang locked up is another prime example of how they messed up his character. When Aang is locked up in the show, he isn't the least bit scared, saying that he would fight him right then and there with his hands tied behind his back. And then when Zhao continues to egg him on, Aang sends him flying into a wall, showing that even tied up, he's strong and capable. But in the film, he just sits there and lets Zhao talk down to him. He doesn't talk back, he doesn't fight back. All he does is sit there like a worthless and scared little boy. This is not the Aang we know and love. The Aang from the show always has something to say, and never sits back and lets himself be talked down to. Another huge thing that disrespected Aang's character was him talking about running away. Again, let's compare the show to the movie. In the show, Aang is so disappointed in himself for running away. We see him lie about being the Avatar when Katara asks him, and after doing so, he has a cringe face knowing that he messed up big time. He knows he let his fellow air nomads down, and let the entire world down. It's a constant insecurity that we see throughout the remainder of the show. But in the film, when he talks about running away from home, he literally does this with a smile on his face, and talks about it like it was nothing.
I ran away from home.
And then we see some terrible acting as he proceeds to say that he was upset, but he says it in the most lighthearted way, and again with a huge smile on his face.
I was just upset.
It's almost as if this pivotal moment in his character's development is whittled down to absolutely nothing, with no consequences whatsoever. And later in the film, we see Aang run away again.
I can't do this.
He would never willingly abandon Katara and Sokka at this point in his journey, especially after how much shame he brought to himself when he ran away the first time. I get that the story needed to move forward and Aang had to go off on his own for the Blue Spirit arc, but in the show, he left because his friends were sick and he wanted to help. He leaves for a selfless reason, which is who Aang is. He's selfless. But the way he ran away in the film was not for a selfless reason, but rather a selfish one. Could they not think of any other way for him to go off on his own? It's just lazy writing. There were also a number of things that the film cut that were vital to Aang's character. The first thing is the scene where we see him go into the Avatar state to escape from Zuko. It's important because this is what showed us how powerful Aang is. But in the movie, we don't know his true power. So far, all we've seen is him be bossed around and sit back and do nothing. I was also very disappointed that they cut the line where Aang says that he really is the last airbender. It's a pivotal realization for Aang, and it brought the title of the show, The Last Airbender, full circle. And considering the fact that the film dropped the Avatar part of the title and just made it The Last Airbender, you would think that they would want this line even more. Now let's talk about Zuko. Zuko is one of my favorite characters in the series. He has so much to mention, but in the film, not so much. For starters, the identifying characteristic of the Banished Prince is his scar, but you can barely see it in the film. It makes his punishment look less severe. Zuko's scar is his biggest insecurity, and in Book 1, what this film is based on, his scar was a reminder of his shameful past, but when you can barely see it, it doesn't have the same powerful effect. The actor that plays Zuko, Dev Patel, just came off of Slumdog Millionaire, a very well-received movie that won 8 Oscars, so there was nothing but excitement when it was announced that he would be playing Zuko. And honestly, he was probably one of the best actors in the film, but the lines he was given and the instruction he was given from Shyamalan were dreadful. Just like Aang's character, the film did not even come close to doing Zuko's character justice. There's one scene in particular that really annoys me, and once again, let's compare scenes from the show to the movie. We're going to look at the scene where Aang escapes Zuko's ship. In the film, Aang jumps off the ship and flies away, and all that Zuko does is just stand there. He doesn't do a thing to try and stop him, and just sits there and whines to Iroh, which I'll actually address as another problem in a minute. Looking at the scene in the show, Zuko fights until the very end trying to capture Aang, because that's the type of person he is. He takes action and never gives up. He oftentimes has to be talked down in certain situations, because sometimes he doesn't know when to stop. As Aang tries to get away, he first fights him one-on-one. Aang of course beats him and gets away, and as Aang flies away on his glider, Zuko doesn't let this happen like he did in the movie. No, he literally jumps off the top part of his ship and pulls him down. Then when Aang goes into the Avatar state and shows his true power, Zuko was shocked, yes, but he still doesn't give up. And when it looks like Zuko is finally beaten, above all odds, he grabs onto the ship and tries yet again to catch the Avatar. Then he's knocked down again, but the relentless Zuko still doesn't give up. He orders his uncle to help him shoot them down, and only when it's clear that there's no possibility of moving their ship, now buried in ice and snow, and them flying far out of their reach, does Zuko finally stop. Zuko never giving up shows how badly he wants to capture the Avatar and get his honor back, but it tells us without saying a thing. In the film, however, instead of showing us his passion to catch the Avatar through his actions, they take a separate scene where Zuko just says it.
For a moment, I had my honor back.
It's almost as if they think the audience is dumb and won't understand unless they actually spell it out for us. It's terrible writing, and this is another example of how the film doesn't know how to mix action with dialogue. There's a scene for him escaping in the action, and then after, there's a scene for him talking. They need to combine these things, and as I said, they wouldn't even need the dialogue scene if they knew how to write. Not combining these things makes the film have endless bulky dialogue scenes that slows the film down and honestly makes it boring. This scene is made even more stupid when Aang joins Sokka and Katara and says,
The Fire Nation is up to something. I have to go back now.
Nothing in the film could have led him to think that the Fire Nation was up to something. And even if it had, this line is made pointless, because right after that, he goes nowhere near the Fire Nation. He instead goes to the Southern Air Temple. You're going back to the Fire Nation? Because that doesn't look like the Fire Nation. It literally says air, and it's a completely separate place on the map. Another scene that the film messed up was the exchange between Zuko and his uncle Iroh at the end of book 1. This was such a powerful scene in the show. Iroh tells Zuko that he sees him as his own son, and Zuko replies saying, "I know, uncle." It's one of the most important parts of both Zuko and Iroh's character. After that, Iroh goes on to lecture him about being cold and using his fire breath, stuff that isn't as important to the scene, but it adds a lot because we see Iroh nag him like a parent. It reinforces what he just said to Zuko. When we look at this scene in the movie, however, they cut the most important part where Iroh says he sees Zuko as his own, and instead, they just have the nagging parent part.
Now be sure to keep your uniform closed up to your neck.
The most annoying part of this, though, is that they kept Zuko's line of,
I know, uncle.
but he said it to the nagging parent stuff rather than the deep moment the line is supposed to be paired with. If you're going to have that iconic line, why not pair it with what it's meant to be paired with? And on top of that, the nagging parent line only worked in the show because it reinforces what Iroh said about being his father, but in the movie we don't have that, so the nagging that's supposed to have meaning behind it has no real purpose. Another scene that really bothers me is the scene where Zhao goes after the moon spirit. In the show, we see Iroh's true power here, and we see his love for life, both humans and spirits. He threatens Zhao with so much passion, desperate to save the spirit. In the movie, however, we see Iroh stand next to Zhao as he takes the moon spirit out, and he does absolutely nothing. And then when Zhao takes a knife out, Iroh says in the most monotone and unthreatening voice,
Commander Zhao, don't.
He's literally within arm's reach as Zhao pulls his knife back and stabs the spirit, and he does nothing. Bro, you were right there. The Iroh from the show would not have just stood there and watched. He would have taken Zhao down before he even had the chance to pick up the spirit. And in the show, that's why they had him come in after Zhao had already captured it. They disrespected the hell out of Sokka in this film as well. The lack of understanding that Shyamalan has for these characters is mind-boggling, and this is especially prevalent with Sokka. Sokka is a funny, goofy guy who at times has confidence, but as more and more of those around him are benders, his confidence drops. But for this video's sake, we're going to focus on Sokka from book 1, who is still confident and goofy. The introduction to his character is perfect. He's called out for flexing as he looks at himself in his reflection. This is the Sokka that we know and love. Sokka is also known for being the guy who makes the plans. He's the leader, the one who put the whole Black Sun invasion together, the one who came up with their well thought out plan to escape the boiling rock, the one who came up with almost every plan Team Avatar had. He's a go-getter and a natural leader. In the film, however, the Sokka that I just described is not the one we got in the film. For starters, he barely used his boomerang, the thing that's his trademark weapon, but I guess I can forgive that. What I can't forgive is that they made Sokka, who's supposed to be goofy, a brooding guy.
What would you do if they tried taking me away?
I'd kill them all.
What is he, Batman? 1, that's not how Sokka talks. 2, that's something that the Sokka from the show would never say. They also made him worried and hesitant. Let's again compare scenes between the show and the movie. The scene we're gonna focus on is the one right after Aang was captured. In the movie, Katara says that they have to go after Aang, and Sokka says,
"What do you want us to do, Katara? How are we supposed to save him? They're on a ship. We'd need a miracle to catch them. I know you think everything's going to work out, but I don't."
Sokka is the leader, the one who comes up with elaborate plans. He would not have just given up like that. Comparing this scene to the one in the show, Sokka is not negative. He's not against going after Aang. He's ready to go right away and tells Katara to get in the boat so they can save him. Do you see what I mean about Shyamalan not understanding these characters? It's as if he didn't like the characters in the show, so he made all new ones and branded them with the names we all know and love. It's nonsense. Going back to how the film can't combine action and dialogue, let's look at one more example. The way Aang reveals himself as the Avatar to Katara and Sokka was so well done in the TV show because it's in the middle of the action. In the movie, however, we see Aang get taken away and there's no mention of his identity. We only find out that he's the Avatar when they have a separate scene dedicated to dialogue.
I believe that little boy might be the Avatar.
They should have had this reveal in the middle of the action like the show did, and it would have cut perhaps the bulkiest dialogue scene in the whole film. And it's also very unsettling that Aang isn't the one to reveal himself to his friends, instead Sokka and Katara's grandmother being the one to do this. Now the title of this video is how this movie disrespected such a great show, and I'm about to give you example after example. There are a lot, so here goes. The whole point of Book 1 is for Aang to make it to the Northern Water Tribe so we can get a waterbending master. That's their plan from the start. That's the journey the three are embarking on. In the movie, however, they have no plan whatsoever. They just go from place to place for no real reason at all. It's not until almost halfway through the movie that Aang is told to go there, and it's for a completely different reason. Instead of going for bending training, he's told to go there to save the Moon Spirit, something that at this point, no one is supposed to know about except for Zhao and Zhao himself, though they messed that part up as well by having him tell Ozai about it, something that Zhao from the show would not have done because he wanted all the glory, but by telling the Fire Lord would obviously take credit for it, leaving Zhao with no credit. But anyway, the mission that is supposed to drive all of Book 1 is just not there. And the thing that really messed me up was the dragon spirit that told him this. I guess the dragon was supposed to replace Roku, but why not just have his real past life? Why make it a dragon? Especially because dragons don't even talk in the Avatar world, including the spirit world. When basing a movie on already existing source material, you can't just make up a dragon spirit. But then again, Shyamalan made up all new characters, so what's adding one more? Another thing they added which made no sense was the test conducted to see if Aang was the Avatar. This is not how bending works in the slightest. They keep making stuff up, and it's so disrespectful to this amazing show. The biggest thing for me, however, is the way they show firebending. In the show, firebending comes from the bender's core. They can make it appear from nothing. But in the movie, if firebenders want to bend, the fire has to be already existing right in front of them. That's how waterbending works, yes, but firebending comes from their inner chi. Why are they just changing the rules? Rules that were established from the beginning, and rules that are one of the most important parts of the show. At the end of the movie, however, we of course see Iroh bend fire from nothing, and it's a huge deal.
He's making fire out of nothing.
But that's how it's supposed to work. It's nothing special. At least it shouldn't be if the film is based on the source material, which the more I dive into this film, the less I think it is. They also said that Sozin's comet was supposed to come in 3 years.
Sozin's comet is returning in 3 years.
But in the show, Roku says that the comet will come by summer's end, meaning that the show takes place roughly around a year. This is made pointless though, because the rest of the films were cancelled, so we never even got to see that. One thing that is truly awful is that Katara and Sokka don't find out Aang's real name until what would be the 3rd episode of the TV series.
Is it okay if you tell me your name?
The monks named me Aang.
Why did they wait this long? Why didn't they have Aang tell Katara his name when they were in the tent? He told her his whole life story and how he ran away from home, but he forgot to say his name? And this gets even worse, because Katara goes on to say that the boy is their responsibility.
This boy is our responsibility.
Katara, you don't even know his name. Why is he your responsibility? With all the things I just talked about, this doesn't even scratch the surface of how bad this movie is. As a former film student, it hurts me to watch parts of this movie. The CGI is terrible, which is especially bad because the film relies so heavily on it. The bending is comical. It really is. It's so bad. What? All those people and all those movements for that tiny rock? There are so many flaws like this too. Like, why didn't the Earthbenders fight back when they were surrounded by Earth? In the show, they put them on a metal ship so they couldn't escape or bend. But here, they could destroy the Firebenders, especially if they take the movie's rules of firebending into account. They can't bend unless they have fire in front of them. The Firebenders have a few tiny fire pits worth of things they can bend, and the Earthbenders have the entire ground they stand on for miles and miles. Even if the Earthbenders were scared, it's so clear who would win in a fight. In the final battle, when the Waterbenders get the moon back, restoring their ability to bend, instead of bending, they tackle them. Why didn't you just do that before? One of the worst parts about this film is the editing. And I actually visited and got a tour of the production company that made it, and they were so proud of this film, which was immediately a red flag. A few years later, I went to film school and I found out that this was the internship that almost everyone could get in film school, but that nobody wanted. I'm not going to say the name of the company because it was really nice of them to give me a tour, but the job they did on this film is horrendous. This movie focused heavily on action, but they do not know how action scenes work. And this isn't just the editor's fault. This is Shyamalan's fault as well while filming. Instead of cutting from shot to shot to keep the action moving quickly and to build suspense, almost every action scene in this film is done in one shot. This is a cool technique when done right, but it's not meant for an action scene. It's meant for dialogue. The third Harry Potter movie does this so well throughout the entire film. This is a perfect example of how and when to use this technique. It works because they did it with scenes that focused on dialogue, but when this technique is used for action, it doesn't work at all. It makes the scene go too slowly and it's unrealistic. It looks way too rehearsed, and we never get to see the characters' faces or emotions. Let's again look at a Harry Potter scene, this time an action one. The fight between Dumbledore and Voldemort in the 5th film was done so well, and this is a good example because it actually deals with water and fire, 2 of the 4 elements the Last Airbender's action is based around. Watch how many times they cut to another shot. It works well because not only do we see the action from far away, close up, and have suspense build with each change of shot, but we also see the characters' emotions as they do close-ups of their faces and show Voldemort laughing, or show Harry being scared, or Dumbledore's extreme concentration to hold Harry back but still compete with Voldemort. That's how an action scene is supposed to be done. Shyamalan needs to know when to use certain filmmaking techniques and when not to use them. One of the movie's biggest problems are its terrible transitions. With almost every change of scene, they dissolve, the most basic and simple transition, and when done right, it's effective. Sticking to the Harry Potter examples, one of my favorite dissolves in the series is in the first Harry Potter film when it dissolves from Harry, who just found out how his parents died, to an establishing shot of King's Cross. An establishing shot meaning the first shot of a scene that is far away and shows where the scene takes place. You normally see this kind of shot at the beginning or at the end of a scene. It's editing 101. One of my favorite establishing shots in any movie was in the Avengers after Thor, Iron Man, and Captain America's fight. This is an example of an establishing shot at the end of a scene. It's the calm after the action, and we see all 3 heroes from afar, and as it zooms out, we see the damage the fight caused, the perfect way to end the scene. There's one transition in this film that is by far the worst. We see the men go after Aang and Zuko, and not only does the final shot of the scene not have an establishing shot, but it's a fast-paced shot that is a prime example of what to use in the middle of an action scene. You can't end a scene on an action shot, and you especially can't do this with a dissolve. This literally looks like something out of my film textbooks that shows what not to do. Another transition where they tried to be fancy but it turned out terribly was when Yue was delivering a powerful and important line, but before she finishes speaking, the scene cuts, and then she finishes what she was saying over the first shot of the next scene.
There is a very spiritual place. The city was built around this place. But we must hurry.
It's so awkward. They should have had her finish her line and had music build up, and then cut to the quickly paced shot. There's a great example of this from Avengers Infinity War, and it's almost exactly like this. Both Captain America and Yue are talking about this special place, Yue talking about the spiritual garden, and Captain America talking about Wakanda. And right after they say this, it cuts to a fast-paced shot. The difference is, Infinity War did it right, and The Last Airbender did it wrong. Infinity War had Captain America finish his line,
I know somewhere.
and music built up, and then bang, it's Wakanda. But with The Last Airbender, by cutting before Yue finished delivering her line, it ruined the suspense and made the end of that scene and the beginning of the next scene very awkward. And the bad editing is not just in the transitions, but it extends to entire scenes. The worst thing is the constant narration of Katara, a tactic in filmmaking that is sometimes used to cover up bad filming and editing.
Aang was practicing, but for some reason, he was having trouble with waterbending.
It's the laziest thing you can do. This tactic should be saved for certain kinds of scenes and movies, one of the best examples being Avatar. Not The Last Airbender, but the Avatar with the blue Na'vi.
Everything is backwards now. Like out there is the true world, and in here is the dream.
This works because the voiceovers aren't just thrown in over the film, they're Jake's video logs that he makes throughout his time on Pandora. Another terrible editing choice was the constant cuts of Aang remembering his days with the air nomads. It's placed in the worst spots possible, especially during the final showdown. It completely ruins the pacing of this action scene that might have actually been good had they not added these scenes here. Those sorts of flashback scenes work best during quiet and slow parts in the movie. They aren't meant to be paired with an action sequence. This film is just so bad, and I hope I shed some light on why it's so hated, both for disrespecting the original series and for its terrible filmmaking techniques. Now that I've made this video, I can finally put this crappy film behind me and move on. Let's just hope that Netflix does better than Shyamalan. Thank you so much for watching, guys. You can follow me on social media to see more of my personal life and see more of this little dude. You can follow me on Twitter and Facebook for Movie Flame updates. And I want to give a huge shout out to all my patrons listed below. If you want to be featured in the next video, plus get a bunch of other rewards, become a patron today. Again, thank you so much for watching. Make sure you press that like button and subscribe, and look out for more great videos on the way.